Hi, everybody. So I just went for a walk and I want to make a kind of closing statement from our series, Making Sense of the Bible. And the reason why I'm making this video is because I want to sum up the whole thing. Because Christ calls us to become a participant in the life of the Trinity. He restores to us what we need. We need the life of God to be in us. We need that divine mercy to be in us. We need that. We need to become part of the flow of love again. And that's the thing that, we are, you could think of the way that we are as we are souls, kind of. We're souls. And it's like we are, sometimes we practice different spiritualities that focus on the soul. And these are things like in the Eastern meditations and things like that. But those things, they kind of are half the solution and get us fixated on something. Like it's almost like we are meant to be a cup that receives the water of divine mercy. And instead we focus on the truth that we are clear, we are the glass, we are awareness, but we miss out on something that is even deeper, a deeper transformation that has a greater kind of balance in it. And that's the thing that we really miss out on. Because the thing is that it's not so much that I'm ever really speaking against anything as something that's bad. Like I'm never saying, okay, that's bad in an abstract way. But a lot of times what I'm speaking about are the idea that certain things are problematic in an organic way. Because the thing is that what we want is the truth. We don't want an imposition of the truth. We want to know where the truth really is, and we want to be able to see why the truth is where it is. So these videos have all been about making sense of the Bible, and a lot of it has been about saying, why is the Bible Catholic? Why does the Bible point to the Catholic faith? Why does the Bible and the Catholic faith, why are they the same stream of transmission, so to speak? Why is it that way? And this video is going to answer three questions. And it's going to kind of be like, why can we not just say, hey, we're going to just go off and be in any kind of, spiritual path that's kind of spiritual but not religious. It's going to say, why do we not do that? Then it's going to say, why do we not go in a Protestant route? And then it's going to say, why do we not go toward Eastern Orthodoxy? And the whole thing is going to keep coming back to the Bible. And it's going to keep coming back to the Bible and the teachings of St. Faustina Kowalska. St. Faustina Kowalska was a Polish nun who received, Jesus appeared to her. It's believed that Jesus appeared to her almost basically in his resurrected body and spoke to her and gave her these revelations of divine mercy. And the divine mercy message is something that the church has said it's not only a devotion, it's not only a special thing that is, given to St. Faustina, it's the essence of the whole gospel. It's the essence of what it's all about. And as we talk about St. Faustina and her life, and we've mentioned her a little bit before in the previous videos in this series when we talked about Pope St. John Paul II, that was one of his big things, was bringing St. Faustina to the forefront. He was the one who canonized her, and really made the Divine Mercy devotion really popular in various ways. But what I want to talk about here is how, again, we're always coming back to how do we understand the Bible? What is the Bible? What is it all about? What is the whole purpose of Christian revelation? What does this all do? And the Bible is the message of divine mercy. It's the message that we are meant to participate in divine mercy, that God has given us his life, and he's brought us back into the life of the Trinity. He's restored to us something that we don't have intrinsically, that we don't have just as we are, that he's given us something new. And so this video is going to go through like, why not Buddhism? Why not Protestantism? Why not Orthodoxy? Why Catholicism? And it really comes down to, this thing where, like, what I was trying to get at, and it's hard to explain. It's almost like when we get to a certain way of practicing our spiritual lives, there's a certain way in which we can kind of think about our lives and we kind of get to a certain type of balance. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to convey that only when you have the Catholic faith do you have the kind of balance that is kind of ideal, that it fully goes into number of yins and yangs it's the maximum number of balanced things that you could get. Because, so for example, let's say that I am practicing Eastern meditation, for example. Let's say I'm repeating a mantra and I'm doing so gently. There's kind of an effort and there's kind of an effortlessness. But that's kind of as far as it goes. There's not really the same type of ultimate openness to complete healing that we have when we're repeating the name of Christ, who resurrects our body and can do so much more for us. There's a deeper dependency. There's more yin and there's more yang when we are in the flow of what God offers us in the Catholic faith. And there's this sense in which, our spiritual practice ends up in various paradoxes when we are in Buddhism, for example. Like in Buddhism, we can't get out of the paradox that we are trying to avoid suffering in order to end suffering. And that doesn't work. And that ultimately what we're doing is we're only really trying to have nirvana because we're running away from suffering. And so it's like we can't get out of the fact that we're attached to pleasure, because we're always trying to get rid of pleasure in Buddhism, but we're ultimately attached to pleasure by trying to be liberated. So it's like we can't, it's like there's a catch-22. So the thing is, a lot of times there are ways in which we don't have as much help, we don't have the full balance of the spiritual life, and we kind of end up with certain errors. Like, we kind of, in a way, we indulge both the higher and lower parts of ourselves rather than this kind of full integration. We said in Buddhism, we kind of zero out things because we say, okay, my basic desire is not to suffer, but that's the lowest desire we have. So we indulge the lowest desire that we have. I mean, I'm not saying this as like a judgment. I'm saying this as a fact. Like, we're indulging the lowest desire we have, which is not to suffer. We're seeing that as the most exalted thing, when really it's human. I mean, it's certain we should try not to suffer, but it's much more heroic to suffer in a way. And it doesn't mean we want to suffer for needless reasons, but the thing is, like, we kind of have this problem of, hey, I want to stop suffering, and of course, in a Christian way, we could do that, but we do that in a way that's kind of more balanced, that has more yins and more yangs. Like, oh, I want to suffer here, so I won't suffer there, later on, So it's like there's this way in which we get more polarities and more complexity, in the sense that we get greater balance and a much more real and robust spiritual life when we engage with things not in the kind of that Eastern paradigm, when we move into the kind of the Christian paradigm. And so there's this necessity, though, of this greater, I said that there's this kind of indulgence of the lower aspects, but also there's this sense in which we have the, what do you call it? Like, we also think that we're superior. We kind of think we're above it all. As my mom once said to me when I was practicing Buddhism, she said, Buddhism is giving up in style. And this is not a thing of saying, like, it's not a thing of insulting the tradition, but it's saying what's happening. We're giving up, but we're giving up in a way that looks wise, it looks positive, and a way that really is true. If there was no incarnation, there really would be no other alternative other than something like Buddhism or Hinduism if the incarnation had not happened. But because the incarnation has happened, we have a very different set of polarities with which to engage. We have a different set of hopes. We have a way out. We have the way of being that Christ is offering to us, which allows us to transcend death, not just as a soul, but as a body. We're going to receive our bodies back. And so that's a very odd thing. That's wacko. That's like a wacko development. And it's not a mythic development. A lot of times people say, okay, that's the exoteric meaning of Christianity. Christianity has this kind of, it's all symbolic, the resurrection is just symbolic of things. No. Christianity is an integration of physical and spiritual polarities in a way that never is possible before Christ. He kind of wove reality together in a new way. We could think of it, the Shroud of Turin, at the resurrection. It's kind of, he breaks it's like a jet breaks the sound barrier. Jesus breaks the matter barrier, and he makes it possible that we too can go and break the matter barrier with it if we become participants in his life. If we receive into ourselves the Eucharist, if we become part of his body, our bodies too will break the matter barrier at the end, when the whole universe breaks the matter barrier, as they kind of redo this, reboot the creation, and we will survive that well. And we won't survive that well if we don't live in his love now and participate in the life of the sacraments as realities being stitched together. Because we have to start being stitched together now in the way he's stitching everything together in the Catholic Church if we want that real healing to be able to transition out of suffering, to transition ultimately out of the real thing. So what I'm going for here is, again, that's kind of saying, why not Buddhism? Because Buddhism it ends up with paradoxes that we can't solve, because we kind of say, or like Eastern religions have these paradoxes that we can't solve because we want freedom from a kind of selfish perspective. They try to, there's the Mahayana Buddhists, they try to do it a different way, and but it still ends up being paradoxical. It still ends up being contradictory in itself, because and then it kind of restricts us to that we don't have access to a full ability to kind of surrender, a full ability to kind of it's all an indulgence of the lower motive, or it's all I'm above it all. And both of those things kind of happen paradoxically in it. I'm just the awareness. I'm not a body. I'm not this. Nothing is happening. Nothing exists. I'm the awareness. Everything is one. It's kind of true. I mean, like that is a real posture in the psyche, but it's kind of halfway there. It's almost like you squint, and you kind of also lose touch with yourself when you go to that place. You kind of zero out and you kind of loop into it. It feels great to kind of get out of it sometimes, but you can do it in a better, more balanced way in the Christian tradition. We have those teachings. Those are robustly developed in the Christian tradition, but much safer. It's much safer, it's much less paradoxical, much more grounded, and it's not going to have the same side effects. So this is something that happened to me, is that when I practiced these things, I had terrible side effects. I actually blew up my whole mind, and I had to recover based on all my techniques were all about witnessing what's happening in the mind, and that caused my mind to just kind of explode. It was a terrifying experience, and many people have this, and Buddhists acknowledge this. There's a lot of teaching now. Dr. Willoughby Britton talks a lot about this stuff. They have a thing called Cheetah House, which is help for meditators in distress. And as far as I know, I'm the only person who ever recovered from this stuff and was able to live a spiritual life afterward in some way, because I converted. I understood, all that time, like I blew up my mind through the Eastern techniques, but then I didn't really even understand Jesus. I really was like, okay, I thought he was an ascended master, more or less, thought he took on the karma of the world, but I began to speak to him. I began to talk to him. And the thing is, the fact that I was voicing my fears to him all the time, it wasn't that like I was being holy or being like I was trying to be Christian-y. It was that I thought I was going to come apart. And I kept telling him how I felt, and eventually I felt heard. And eventually I was healed, and different things happened bit by bit as I kind of climbed out of that over a number of years. But it's a terrible thing which have meditation side effects. And so the thing is that it's not that I'm saying these things because I'm like, I don't like Buddhism, or I'm a Christian, or I'm a Catholic, and it's arbitrary. I'm talking about these things about the nature of the human person and how the human person really is. That it just doesn't work when we do it in these other ways. This is just not how we're supposed to function. And we need a much more balanced way of managing the mind rather than what we get in Buddhism. We need a full body workout. We need one that uses all the different mental faculties rather than just one that uses one. Or else we become unbalanced and we end up with these type of side effects, and the traumas come up and we don't know how to deal with them, and it's a mess. And this is acknowledged by Buddhists, again, with Cheetah House, trauma-sensitive mindfulness, these type of things. They know that there are these side effects. And I think that we can really have a much safer spiritual path when we're practicing within the Christian tradition. Everything is dangerous. But the problem is that if we practice within a more balanced framework, we're going to get better results. So those are some reasons why I think organically we could say that we can't be going in an Eastern direction. We can't be in these other religions. And that's really, I think, the religions that today are really a draw for spiritual seekers. There are people who maybe might turn to Islam. There are people who might turn to other things. But I think that really a spiritual seeker today, the marketplace is saturated with really a lot of the Eastern religions, the New Age movement, alternative spirituality, manifesting, these type of things. And these things are all like truncated versions of what we have in the Christian tradition. We have better versions of these things that are much more grounded in the Christian tradition, that are more effective, safer, and everything like that. So it's really, and it's suitable, and it's just so much better. But the thing is, sometimes the bottom line is that a lot of times people who are hungry for spiritual things don't know that the Christians are offering this. And the problem is that Christians need to make it clear that this is what we have, because we've got the real deal. We've got the real spirituality, and we're not showing that to people. And that's a failure that is, I think, probably in some ways on us. And the thing is, we need to go out there and we need to make this thing obvious to spiritual seekers, because or else they're not going to know that this is the way out of all their paradoxes of their life. And instead they're going to go to other things which are basically like what they're looking for, but just kind of like a shrunken down version. One thing I want to say here, and this is where we're going to lead into the Bible, is that when you look at the phases of spiritual development in Buddhism, or the stages of contemplation in Buddhism, you'll see something that we're going to see in the Bible and something we're going to see in Christianity, and something that's going to help us understand the nature of what is true. And in many ways, there are stages of contemplation that happen. Like in Buddhism, they talk about sila, samadhi, and panya. So sila is discipline, samadhi is concentration, and panya or pana, depending on the Pali or Sanskrit, is wisdom. And the thing is, you kind of progress through those phases, and those are different aspects of the path. It's like you start out observing the basic moral precepts, like you're not living a wild life anymore. Samadhi, you're focused, your mind gets focused, and eventually you develop wisdom. That's how it works. This is just a natural way that things progress. Or, so if you have these different phases, you kind of have this kind of framework. But when you grow, and you only are doing that as an inside job, if you're only thinking about that as like what you feel in yourself and how you are just growing as a person, that happens only inside the soul. That happens only inside your own consciousness. It happens only as an interior process, and it doesn't have the same depth as it does when it's in the Christian tradition. And the Christian tradition has this balance where it has these three phases, which are the purgative, illuminative, and unitive phases. And in the purgative, illuminative, and unitive phases, it's very similar to sila, samadhi, and panya, but it's at a higher level. It's not truncated. It's more holistic. It's more integrative. It has a bigger scope at each phase, because not only are you just not living a wild life just for the sake of not being messed up by it, you're living the commandments of God. That's the purgative way. You're living the commandments of God and avoiding sin. Not only are you gaining in concentration, you're being illuminated by divine grace. That's the illuminative way. Not only do you end up having wisdom in yourself, but you end up having union with the divine, with God, with the life of the Trinity. So there's these many. So that these are analogous phases, but at a higher level. And that's what Christianity proposes to us: is an analogous growth that's analogous to the basic human growth, but is the real deal. It's because it's elevated. It's a much more elevated way of dealing with things. So that's really the way of thinking about this. So now, how does this tie into the Bible? Well, the Bible has a very similar structure to this. So the Bible actually communicates this profound level of human transformation through the way that it has the Proverbs, which are kind of like the basic moral guidance, the Psalms, which are kind of the illuminative type thing, and the Song of Songs, which is the language of the unitive, which is, it's kind of like a romantic work, but it's about the union of the soul with God. And the Psalms are there, and the Proverbs are there. So the scriptures contain the kind of DNA of the ultimate transformative path, and that's what we're looking at here. So now, what I want to say here is that why is it that when we look at the DNA of Scripture, why is it that one of the most beautiful things in Christianity is the Eastern Orthodox or Eastern Catholic traditions, and they really speak a lot about how to transform consciousness. You can look at some videos by, if you want more popular or maybe like a more like thing that would be accessible to someone who has more of a background in odd things, it would be like Metropolitan Jonah Pfaffhausen. You look at some of his videos, Father Spiridon. There's all these guys who are online who have really good videos that kind of explain the way of managing the mind from a Christian perspective. You'll recognize a lot of the stuff from like a meditative perspective. Like even if you're familiar with Eastern meditation, you'll notice that in the there are differences. There are very big differences, but you'll notice some of the similar structure, like repeating the Jesus prayer while noticing the incoming thoughts and stuff like that. You'll see this kind of these analogies, like a deeper way of doing mantra practice. Basically, you'll realize that that's what's there. And it's very powerful in the Orthodox tradition. And they really have this really established tradition of the Jesus prayer. And this is a really beautiful thing, and it's really helpful because it shows you a real clear path of transformation. And there are many, either the Eastern Orthodox Church are not in communion with the Pope, so they don't. So there's many. They had argument. We have had arguments back in the day. We're not together anymore, but they have priests, they have sacraments, they have the Eucharist, they have this tradition of the Jesus prayer. And this is a beautiful tradition. And we have also, there are churches that have this tradition of prayer that are in communion with the Pope. And those are Eastern Catholics. So they have the same spiritual tradition, but they don't say, hey, there's something wrong with the Catholics. They're together with us. And one of the things that they say is wrong with the Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox, is they claim that the Catholic spirituality is too hot-blooded. They claim that there's this also a kind of delusion of romance with God. They claim that the saints flirt with God in the West, and they kind of go into spiritual delusion, just thinking without any repentance, without any regret for their sins. They're just thinking, oh, God loves me, and I'm having a fantasy. And that's kind of a caricature of the thing, but there's a special technical term for it called prelest, which is this kind of spiritual delusion where you're kind of experiencing all kinds of consolations and all kinds of heightened feelings without really having deep virtue, regret for your sins, and getting the basics down. So that's really what the problem is. It's like you're having all these ecstatic experiences, powers, and all kinds of things are happening. You're having all these gifts and ecstasies, and you're kind of flirting with God, and you think you're great, and it's like, but really you're not grounded in humility. You're not grounded in those things. And there's something to this critique, and we all should take it to heart in a way. We all should keep to the basics. We all should be humble. We all should have these things. But there's almost a sense in which in the Orthodox tradition, they emphasize this kind of regret before God without as much. It doesn't seem that they emphasize confidence and love and closeness as much. And one of the reasons this video series has all been about making sense of the Bible. And when we read the Bible, we see the Song of Songs. We see that the Song of Songs has a real it's disturbing imagery for me anyway. It's very romantic, and we realize that that's how in the lives of the Catholic saints, that's how God talks to them, and that should make us say, hey, if that's in the Bible and that's in the Catholic saints and that's not the Orthodox saints, it makes sense that the fullness of the faith, that is the same stream of consciousness as the Bible, is in the Catholic saints and not in the Orthodox saints. Doesn't mean that the Orthodox style is bad. It just means you can't set it up against. If you want to be humble, if you want to be contrite, if that's your personality, okay. But the thing is, there are saints like St. Francis. He's Italian. He talks with his hands. He has emotions. He's able to he has that. So that's really important. So I think what's really important is we realize that is the way that goes. So what I'm going to do here is my phone is dying. So I'm going to pause this video because I think there's some good stuff in it, and we're going to bring it all home in a final video when we come back, when we have enough power in the phone.